In this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast, we talk about agency, creative services, etc., and how you can scale with Jesse P. Gilmore of Niche and Control. We talk about 5 different steps that agency owners need to take in order to grow their business, from sales and marketing to standard operating procedure. Let's jump right into this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast. Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Jesse P. Gilmore, CEO of Niche and Control. Jesse is an agency growth advisor for marketing agency and creative firm owners. Niche and Control gives agency owners a blueprint for turning marketing agencies into a growth machine. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jesse, and how did you get into this business, and what do you do with more specificity?
Yeah, totally. So I've been a serial entrepreneur for over 13 years. And my first business, I kind of fell in love with the idea. And what happened was I kind of embedded myself into the business so much that I couldn't get out. I couldn't figure out how to delegate. I couldn't really, basically be that CEO that I was trying to be. And so I ended up dissolving my first business solely based around kind of not being able to see the vision that I had when I first started the business. I owned 2 other businesses, had the same thing happen, so I didn't really know what was going on. Ended up, sucking up my ego and working in corporate America to learn about business systems, and ultimately figuring out the solution to what happened in my first businesses. And so now I'm taking those systems and business systems and bringing them back to the people that need it the most. Agency owners ultimately have the hardest time increasing capacity. They know how to build, grow businesses, but for their own selves, and they're basically like the same way that I was in my first 3 businesses. So I help them scale, build business systems. A lot of it's based around operations, kind of like client fulfillment, and then also the people systems. But I also help with client attraction, which I think we're going to be talking about a bit today, as well as some sales systems as well, just to make it so that you're not throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what sticks, but you have like the repeatable, predictable systems for growth.
Sorry, I'm muted here.
No worries.
Let's talk about, what was your first business, the one that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it was called the North Coast Collective. And back in 2006, me and my brother, Jeremy, we had this idea of basically uniting multimedia concert calendars for the Twin Cities of Minnesota and making it to where you have like a one-stop shop for all the venue calendars. So we took 120 venue calendars, condensed them into one calendar, basically made it to where every single band that was coming in, we created band pages. So we were a little bit ahead of the time. Facebook was just kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah.
MySpace was pretty popular back in the day. And then we would take YouTube videos and we'd find kind of like our whole slogan was see and hear the band before the show. Mm-hmm. And so the whole thing was based around this venue calendar and being able to kind of like have a one-stop shop when it comes to music and entertainment. So the band page is what we were kind of stuck in. We couldn't figure out how to do it. And that was before, if anybody's a coder and super geeky, it's the PHP. Before that was built, it was all HTML code. And so we were just like behind the scenes crunching numbers and stuff.
So what was the fundamental challenge that prompted you? So you had that business, you had some challenges, and then you went to corporate America, yes?
Yeah.
And then, so what was the fundamental challenge with that business that prompted you to like go back into corporate America?
Yeah, good question. I think it was that the founders, me and my brother, were just indispensable. We couldn't replace ourselves in the business. And for anybody that's scaling, you know that you can't do it all and it can't all live in your head. And you have to be able to get processes and systems out, figure out how to delegate work, give it to other people. And basically make it so you can focus on growth and the business can be just a machine. We couldn't figure out a way out. And actually, as we were becoming more popular, like Beyonce, like retweeting our tweet, and we get 1 million people to come to our website, like, holy shit. Or sorry. We're like, holy crap, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh man, now we got ads and we got to get like whatever. And we just couldn't get out of it. Like every single day, we just had to build more band pages, and we couldn't get out of that whole system or figure out how to make
Yeah.
somebody else be able to do it.
So what did you do in corporate America?
Yeah, good question. So I started off as an intern and very quickly started working under the VP of HR. And we were running strategic initiatives for a $4 billion global corporation with the sole mission. My sole mission within corporate America was to remove all single points of failure. Single points of failure is when like a single person, vendor, basically, if you have information silos within an organization, that person retires, for an example, then all of a sudden the quality of the service drops or is
Mhm.
not able to actually function. So yeah, building those systems, developing systems, succession plans, career development, progression, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like a mix between quality, operations, HR, and continuous improvement.
So with niche and control, your focus, your clients are agency owners,
Mhm.
agencies, creative owners, etc. Dive into kind of like some of the work that you do with agency owners.
Yeah, totally. So I have kind of like two buckets of types of clients. I have ones that are kind of like the solopreneur clients, where a lot of times they're working with either contractors or they are that single point of failure. And what I do a lot of times is start with them on time management. If you are going to be a CEO, you really have to have like limits on how much you're going to work. This is ultimately anytime that someone's like, "Yeah, I worked 80 hours a week," and it's like, "Oh, your prioritization sucks." So, so that's
Sorry, I'm muted, but that's exactly right. Like I remember when I just started in advertising, I worked at Universal McCann, and it was like, we talked with pride about how much we worked
Mhm.
until and I was, I also had I was dating a girl and it was just kind of like falling apart. So and I didn't realize it at the time. I knew it was falling apart, but I didn't realize why I was staying at work so much. It was because I was like drowning my mind into the work that I was doing, and I loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
But the funny part is, at one point, I got really upset with my supervisor. Like, we had a blowout conversation. He was like, Robert, just because you're working a lot doesn't mean you're working hard or you're more productive. I mean,
Mhm.
it's good that you're working a lot, but that might also be a sign that you're not working smart enough or
Mhm.
effective enough, etc. So like
Mhm.
that resonates with me it's such an important thing to like realize, because
Mhm.
it's much better to work, a 40 or 50-hour week than an 80-hour week. Like, you won't burn out. You'll be
Mhm.
happier. You'll have a work-life balance.
Mhm. Absolutely. And to piggyback on that, Robert, one of my clients, one of my case study clients of this whole thing, he was working 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. And when I asked him, like, why did you start the agency in the first place? And he was like, "Oh, I want to be closer to my family." And I was like, "Oh man." And so one of the things that we ended up doing was I was like, "Okay, if you were just to work 40 hours, let's compartmentalize everything within your week, and that way if you don't get 100% done but you get 20% done, but it's the 20% that makes all the difference. Let's figure out how to make that kind of just a living reality for you." And within 6 weeks he went from the 14-hour days to 8-hour days, and then in his fourth month he quadrupled his revenue. And so it's because when you're given space to be able to think of where the business is going, you just fundamentally change the ways that things are going, and so, yeah,
You know,
time
I I
management's so
I
huge.
I th I think about it as I talk to people, other agency owners, business owners from time to time, and I say it with pride that, the business the challenge with my business is it's named after me, and I did that for a very specific reason. I had something to prove when I started the business, like,
Mhm,
I'm gonna
mhm,
build this thing, right? But
mhm,
now it's like I want the less I'm involved in day-to-day, like, ad buying or whatever the thing is, the
mhm.
better it is for the business, because the minute I step out of the business day to day, like when I'm not, I certainly touch the very, very big things, or the things that no one else can do in the business.
Yeah.
But the day-to-day stuff, it's a point of pride, and other
Mhm,
business owners understand this. It's a point of pride when I'm not touching the in the weeds stuff, because it means our business can operate without Robert Brill, which is a
mhm.
really important thing.
So important, so important. Yeah, it's kind of like the single domino is the time management. So going back to your question about, what do I actually do with the clients? Let me walk you through the 5 steps of what's called the leverage for growth method. And it'll kind of give us some topics here. So the number one is to really carve out 8 to 10 hours per week for you to work on the business. So being able to just carve out time, get out of hustling, get into that CEO role and go, okay, where's this business going? And in that 8 to 10 hours, my clients will always be like, okay, I carved out the time. What am I supposed to do? And ultimately, what you need to do is just document stuff. Like, what are you doing right now? Just brain dump. Here's all the million things. Okay, prioritize it based around what is fires that you're trying to put out in the business, and what is like kind of stuff that you could delegate, automate, even avoid. Like there's some things you don't have to check your email every 2 seconds or respond to the client like immediately. So anyway,
It
the
feels
eight
like
to
you
10,
do. It feels like you do. And
especially
I'll
in
tell you,
agencies, because
I
yeah.
wish I knew. So in 2018, like there was a lot of stuff that was happening in our business, a lot of really great things. We're growing really fast. And I
Hmm.
had a conversation with one of our clients who was, I had worked for him at one point and now he was a client. And he
Hmm.
was like, Robert, are you spending time working on the business? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm ad buying. I'm thinking about campaigns and reporting. He's like, no, Robert, the business of the business. I was like, oh, that's a thing. and, and and that one conversation, I remember where we were, I remember who it was. That
Hmm.
one conversation resulted in such a dramatic change. It took a long time. It took a year and a half for that change, but that seed made
Hmm.
such a profound impact on the business. So
Hmm.
100% rubber stamp on that. That is so key.
It truly is. And the interesting thing, like, before I go back into the 5 steps, one thing that's out there that is a total lie is that you need to hustle 24/7 in order for you to grow your business. You just need to be really smart. You need to know where things are going. And scaling does not happen overnight. And it does not happen from being interested in scaling. You have to be committed, because you're going to literally die and be reborn numerous times as a business owner in order for you to actually grow. And that anytime you hit like a growth plateau, it's not the business, it's the business owner. And that's part of the whole, I'm assuming from 2018 to now, you're a completely different person than you were 3 years ago.
Completely different person and a completely different business. And one of the things that I say a lot is, and maybe this changes, right? I'm not talking about Fortune 500, although I think it might be possible or plausible, at least, that this is true for that too. But the
Mhm.
job as a CEO for my business as a startup changes anywhere between 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
One period of time could be, hey, I got to get published because I need credibility. Okay, so I
Mhm.
focus all my energy on that, or a lot of my energy. The next one
Mhm.
is, holy cow, we have big campaigns coming, we got to hire. Okay, focus a couple months on hiring.
Mhm.
One of the big things that we had that I needed to focus on was, hey, we're hiring really talented people. Why are people not staying with us long term?
Mhm.
And then something was clearly wrong. Like, it's like I have gangrene in my arm. I don't know why it's happening, but I know something's freaking wrong here. I got to fix it really quickly.
Yeah.
Then another 6 months of trying to figure out, okay, the gangrene is because of an infection, right? And the infection in this case, we had no process, we had no standard
Mhm.
operating procedure. Then spend
Mhm.
another 6 months getting the very foundation of a standard operating procedure. And so our business has grown dramatically. People are staying with us longer. And all of this is because the the thinking on the business is
Mhm.
about how do we grow and scale. And
Mhm.
what's interesting about this is, I know when we're on the precipice of another growth moment in our business.
Mhm.
But it's what I've come to realize, I don't know exactly where that growth is going to be. And I'm not talking about client growth, I'm talking about how we evolve, how we operate.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can feel it coming, it's coming, and then it erupts, and then new
Mhm.
ground is developed. And once that
Mhm.
new ground is developed, then you have an opportunity to kind of like grow more and create new systems that are going to.
Mhm.
Sorry. I mean, like, I love exactly this because this has been such a fascinating journey for me. It's like, I love
Mhm.
everything you're talking about here.
Cool. Well, let me finish the 5 steps. So if you remember, the first step was to carve out 8 to 10 hours per week to work on the business. Then what are you going to do with that time? You're going to simplify the service and get everything out of your head into processes and systems. So that way, ideally, you're able to effectively delegate. And ultimately, by doing so, automatically you're going to increase the customer value that they feel, because when you know what's going to happen next, you can communicate it better. And when you communicate it ahead of time and then you do it, it creates trust, and trust creates long-term partnerships. And one of the biggest fallacies that happens is that everybody should be going after new clients all the time. The easiest way to scale is actually to keep the clients that you have. So that's a huge thing. The step number 3 is, once you're creating a better value for the client, it's really to narrow your focus and focus only on the core things that differentiate you in the marketplace. So narrowing your focus is step number 3. And this is really where you position and create that core offering, and then price it based around the value, as opposed to just playing the commodity game. Never, ever, ever be the low cost person or the lowest cost provider, and be proud of that because of the value that you're able to offer. So that's number 3. Number 4 is based around building and optimizing your client attraction. So how clients go from, not knowing you into appointments, and then build your client conversion systems as well. So that way it just becomes this kind of rinse and repeat when it comes to the pipeline. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, because I know that's what Robert wanted to talk about. And then the 5th step, once you have the scalable system, you have good pricing, you're going to the market and building a pipeline. The next thing is based around step number 5, which is empowering your people to run whole parts of the company. So that way you can focus on growth, or taking time, so that way you can focus on vision, perspective, and then really that CEO stuff that you were talking about a second
So
ago.
let's talk about the part about creating scalable growth systems. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So client attraction is really based around kind of like a 3-legged stool. I always talk about client attraction as kind of like a 3-legged stool, that each leg of a 3-legged stool is based around the strength of the other. So the weakest leg of a stool is basically the strength of the whole. And the 3 legs of client attraction is based around outbound, so reaching out to people that don't know you at all, and starting conversations with them. Inbound systems, which a lot of my clients specialize in. It's all the stuff like paid ads or website builds, or messaging campaigns or nurture campaigns, all that kind of stuff. And then the third one is based around referral systems and tapping back into the people that you've already served. I think that's one of the biggest missing components of this whole thing, because ultimately your previous clients will give you the messaging that you need to get more of them, which is a whole maybe I'm giving too much gold in this podcast, but it seriously is it's like the biggest missing component when I talk with people. And I'm like, have you done client interviews before? And they'll be like, no. And then I'm like, well, can you ask them why they purchased with you in the first place? And then I'm like, oh no. And just transcribe it, figure out what words they're used, put them into an ad and run it, and just see what happens. It's like, and then if it resonates, you just kind of tweak it, get a copywriter, and all of a sudden you're starting to duplicate clients. Find the ones that really resonated with you, or like it was an easy experience to work with, or get them results. Just duplicate that. Just do it over and over and over again. And so anyway, I know we went
So
right into tactics, but that is a
So that's
huge.
very interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting to me. So point A is outbound reach out.
Yep.
Point B is inbound nurture or inbound communications,
Yep.
getting people to find you. And the third one is what, doing client interviews and repurposing that content as what, advertising or
So you
messaging.
don't necessarily always have to do it's more so you can refine your messaging so it resonates.
Hmm.
So if I tapped into, like I do them all the time. If you guys go to my website, nicheandcontrol.com, you can look at all the client interviews. I talk with my clients for over 30 minutes. And I'm just like, hey, what was going on in your business before working together? What kind of warning signs did you experience in your business that caused you to want to, reach out or have a conversation? What made you choose us as opposed to other providers out there? These kind of answers to the questions, the words that they're using can be used in a million different things. You can talk about where they are. And so ultimately why people buy anything is based around they're in their current situation, they have a desired situation, and there's a gap, right? And advertising, basically, if you're really good at advertising, you basically are having people that have that gap kind of all together. And then
Mhm.
you clearly define the two and you separate them, and that creates agitation. And then the agitation, you supply the product or service or transformation, in my case, that bridges that gap. So
Hmm.
when you're trying to understand what is going to work in the marketplace for you to scale your business, you need to know current state, desired state, gap, and then why yours fits in there. And if you can position yourself correctly, it just resonates. Anybody that watches my case studies or my live webinar and they're like an ideal client, they're booking time with me. It happens all the time. It happened during a coaching session earlier today. Like they just watch it and they're like, holy crap, that's me. And then like, oh, okay, I got to act on it.
And how do you and so in that case, where do you come in and work with clients, and how do you help your clients? Like, I
Yeah,
understand
totally.
the content of what you're doing, but what part of this are you kind of like pushing forward?
Yeah, totally. So I'm kind of like a mixture between coaching, consulting, and online programs. So I have a hybrid. Ultimately, what I found was I created the leverage for growth method after working with my client Warren, and we took his business from 15,000 per month with one employee to over 100,000 per month in revenue in less than 12 months. And I took that and I kind of reverse engineered. Okay, what were the exact steps that we ended up doing? And I created the leverage for growth method. And what I ended up doing was I wanted it to basically be everything that a person would need in order for them to get from their current situation to their desired situation. And so I built it as a course. And what I found was is that the clients that got the best results were actually using the course, but they needed some coaching and consulting on top of it. So what I do is I meet with my clients every single week. We're basically doing continuous improvement and project management in order for them to constantly move forward through the program, but also be able to problem solve on some of the things that kind of come up as obstacles or barriers to them growing. And then in between times, if for any reason my clients can't wait for the next coaching session, and then they'll either send me a message or we'll figure out some type of Loom coaching in between times. So that way they're never really like they're not never on an island by themselves. So it's the online training program. They can do it themselves if they really wanted to. It's the weekly coaching accountability calls, and then in between times, if they have anything that they need feedback on, then within 24 to 48 business hours, I'm already responding, kind of like this, but in a Loom coaching video. So
So what are
it's a growth advisory. That's what it is.
And so what are some of the tactics you use for your to acquire clients? Like, you mentioned a webinar, but, like, let's talk about kinda like that process there, 'cause it's particularly illuminating, to see how you build your business.
Yeah, totally. So for my business, ultimately, I position myself completely different than anybody else in my space. Anybody that's in the agency space knows that a lot of my competitors will send 400 emails per day, nonstop, all the time with this generic kind of thing. And what I do is really based around personalization. And the only reason why I've positioned myself that way, as opposed to doing what everybody else is doing, is because I need to separate myself from everybody else. I am doing something totally different. No other competitor brings on agile project managers into an organization and start to formulate a whole bunch of stuff. So personalization is number one. What I do, I love LinkedIn. It's a great platform for a lot of different it kind of like trims the fat when it comes to the quality of the leads that can come from that. I only accept my ideal clients as connections. And ultimately, I just start conversations and really provide value. Sometimes it's based around content. Other times, I'll kind of go through a list of who connected with me, and I'll see whether or not they actually qualify. So I'll do kind of like an audit of their social media profile, their website, and kind of where they're at right now. And a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll find something that's really, really cool about them. And I kind of like to celebrate with them, and then ultimately just give them some type of message based around, and kind of what they're trying to accomplish. A lot of times, if clients are trying to create like partnerships or things like that, I celebrate with them because ultimately that is something that differentiates agencies. Is if that keep the clients long. That's one of the things that's different. And so I'll personalize, I'll start a message or a conversation. Sometimes I'll do a Loom video, depending on whether or not I feel like as though I could actually help them. And basically just start conversations. That's one of the main things. LinkedIn is one of my main jams, but that's the outbound. My inbound system, I'm constantly refining my messaging. I have different ads kind of going out just to get some people to my website. I'm testing different things with landing pages, but it's not necessarily anything I'm really expecting, as you shouldn't base all of your business based around inbound leads, because it takes a long time for that kind of message to start working. And then also I provide a live webinar where I talk a lot about my client case studies, like Warren's story. I kind of, go more into detail with that. Mike's story, who was, I was talking about just a little bit ago, 12 plus hour days, bringing him back down. Some of my other clients have doubled their revenue, but only had to add one team member. So the live webinar I do every single month. And a lot of times I'm getting that either from attendees come from ads or my LinkedIn connections, and I like to just really nurture that conversations. So personalization is my main jam, but that's only because I'm doing exactly the opposite of what my competitors are doing.
And how long have you been working on this?
Niche and Control is a little bit less than 3 years old.
Mm.
I went all in. So my wife left corporate America, and I and we have kids. And during the pandemic, it was kind of like the side thing for a while. But we went all in as a family in the business in June. And the methods work. In less than 2 months, I had 11 new clients, which ultimately, if I'm working with clients in the way that I am, that keeps me busy. But yeah, so in answer to your question, I went all in June. But as a side business, I was still getting clients like Warren, as well as I was doing it.
And so as we wrap up here, Jesse, tell me, how can people find you?
Yeah, totally. So nicheincontrol.com is my website. I do live webinars every month, except for December. We had one in the late November, so the next one will be in January. If you are a marketing agency owner, Niche and Control, I also have a free training where I talk a lot more about leverage growth method, what I ended up doing with Warren. So it's all there. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com/Jesse P. Gilmore. And you can find me there, and I give content all the time. So.
Very cool. Jesse P. Gilmore with Niche and Control. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the LA Business Podcast. If you like what we're doing on this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple or Google Play, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations for a guest you'd like to hear on this podcast, please email me, robert@brillmedia.co. Thank you. Have a fantastic day.